It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 212. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Good evening.
Godra.
Perfectly normal introduction.
Tam.
Good morning.
Thalen.
Hey there.
So no questioning whether or not it's actually 212 this week?
Mm.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah.
So in the growing new tradition of picking up with topics that, rolled off of the last one, Grace, you had a really interesting topic that we just did not have enough time to adequately address last week. So, want to do a topic lead-in?
Sure. I will preface this by saying that this topic occurred to me as I was playing through Hollow Knight the other day, which is a very large game. And I was looking up some maps and things online and realized how my thoughts have evolved over the years, and I hope to have a discussion about how I interact with, cheats and guides and walkthroughs for games, because I find that, depending on the type of game, I seek things out or I refuse to seek things out, and depending, over time this has changed a bit, and depending on what kind of information I want, that determines whether I look for, a way to actually alter the game to cheat, or if I just look for a guide or a walkthrough to help me get past a rough spot. So for instance, in Hollow Knight, I'm on my second playthrough, and I'm basically playing the entire time with a map open in the second window, because that game's very big and I'm never going to remember where I'm going. So I'm curious sort of how other people engage or don't with that, guides and things for games.
I definitely have been thinking about this since you brought it up. And for me, it's the point where I'm frustrated more than I am having fun, is the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna push forward on this one. Or when I feel like there's the game is too obtuse about what I need to do. Because I think that there's some games where it's like, somewhere in the world is the thing you need. Turn over every stone until you find it. And I just don't want to do that. Like, that's not fun for me, so I don't.
Find all the gems for the thieves' headdress in Skyrim.
Yeah.
That one's just complete bullshit.
There's a mod for that, and yes, I installed that mod because, seriously?
Yeah, exactly. Like, Yakuza recently was one of the quests I had was, hey, somebody in town probably knows about this thing. Talk to every NPC that you can talk to until you find the one that knows something about it. There's no other hints, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, when a game isn't respecting your time is definitely when I will show up with a map. The other time I'll show up with a guide is, I think you kind of alluded to it, on the second playthrough, when I'm going for a more completionist. I'm trying to complete everything.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of the reason why I'll be honest, even on the first playthrough, because I don't play a lot of Metroidvanias, and I, am just incredibly bad at some aspects of them, but I was really enjoying the game. So I used the map some, and I also watched a guide basically for every boss. Like, I would go and engage with them first and try for a while, and then I would be frustrated and I would go and watch a guide, and usually it still took a while before I could beat the boss, because I'm just not very proficient with that type of game. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to push forward. I would have just gotten frustrated and wandered away, and that would have been a huge shame, because game is great.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely for me on a second playthrough or beyond, like all bets are off. Like
Yeah.
I'll use any and every resource that I can find, because at that point, like I'm either trying to discover things that I didn't in the first playthrough, or something like that, and I'm not going to spoil things because I already played the game once.
I play
There's like
FF5 literally every year and pull up a
Yeah.
map to both of the forest sections every single time because navigating them is annoying and I don't need to be messed with that anymore.
you don't need to memorize that. It's not worth it.
But yeah,
Hey,
for a first playthrough, it's definitely if the game does not respect my time, or if the game does not provide enough information on stuff. Like that's the other thing that will, if there are mechanics that just aren't explained at all, and I'm being required to make choices with no idea of the repercussions of these
Yes.
choices, then yeah, I'm going to go find a guide, because no, I don't want to make those choices blind.
Right. No, that's absolutely. And I think what I think the way Kodra put it was the respecting your time is absolutely. I love that phrase because it's so accurate.
Like there was a time years ago that I would have done that, and quite possibly I would have gotten 10 hours into the game, decided, well, all those choices were dumb, and now I understand this better, and started over from the beginning.
But I think that's part of the problem is like as I've gotten older, my
Yeah.
willingness to struggle has gone down significantly. Like
Yeah.
I will fiddle around with something for between 10 minutes and 30 minutes depending on how frustrating it is. And if I can't sort it out in that time, I will go look it up. And I feel like I'm very open to guides and cheats, honestly, and anything like that if it improves my enjoyment of the experience.
Yeah.
Like I will absolutely go download mods that will take away encumbrance because I hate encumbrance. I hate inventory management. I will absolutely play Final Fantasy V on an emulator so I can have a button that makes things speed up so I can speed my way through the unskippable dialogue. I guess like there was a period of time in my life where I was more than happy to sit down with the game and make maps by hand and like mark off solutions that I've tried until I finally come up with a solution.
Mhm.
But part of that was also a time prior to me having access to the internet.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference.
And also a time when auto mapping in games wasn't a standard thing. Like,
Exactly, yeah.
But I find also it really varies for me with the type of game and the type of whatever the block or frustration is. Like I am usually willing to struggle for a lot longer on a puzzle that is obviously a puzzle
mhm.
than I am on, go find this guy for a quest, or, beat your head against this boss until you figure out how to beat it.
Right.
My thing has
Yeah.
been for a while that, especially in RPGs, if I feel like I am stuck, I am just going to the guidebook. Or, now that I'm older, the internet.
Yeah.
Well, I think more than anything for me, it's like, am I enjoying this experience? Like, is the thing that I'm struggling with an enjoyable experience for me? Like, so am I wandering around aimlessly looking for a thing? Like, I like to wander around aimlessly. I like to kill stuff in the process. So that's mostly not going to be a thing that I worry about too much. Like, most games that I really need to get somewhere in have a mini map, so I'm not going to get super lost, but if I'm not going to find the exact objective, then fine, I'll wander around. Is it a puzzle where it feels like I just have to keep trying combinations until I finally land on the one because I'm not grasping what advisement it was supposed to be giving me? Then no, I will absolutely look that up. But it's mostly about enjoyment for me. Like, is the thing that I'm about to short circuit and skip going to damage my enjoyment of the experience? And if the answer is no, then yeah, sure, fine. I'll look the thing up.
Yeah, like I'm pretty highly unlikely to go look up a guide for a Zachtronics game because the puzzles are the entire point of the game.
Right.
And if I cheat on those, then why am I even playing?
Yeah, why are you playing that?
And there's a weird middle ground that I have where if it's a game where I feel like it's easy to miss stuff and I don't think I'm going to play it more than once, which is many games because I'm unlikely to, I will look and check to see, like, is there something I should be doing here that I will permanently miss later if I don't do it now?
Yeah, I definitely also will explicitly look for, like, try to avoid any other spoilers on the game, but if I have any reason to believe that there's things that can be permanently missed, yeah, I want to know about those.
Right. And, it's not always perfect, but that being said, if it is this is also me getting old, but if it is a YouTube, if to figure out what I need to know, some incredibly annoying 7-minute long video to explain what could be done in 12 lines of text, I am out. I will figure it out myself.
Yes.
Yeah, if I can't look up a written guide, I am unlikely to go to YouTube for anything, except maybe if I'm struggling with a boss fight, because for those, then actually just seeing someone play through it is usually good enough. And often, if I can't find an actual useful video for that, I will just turn the sound off and just watch, because really, I mean, I'm old. I can't deal with YouTube personalities, quote unquote.
Yeah, if I have to watch one, I'm typically muting it because, oh my god.
The main time I find those kind of things useful is if it's a situation where I need to find a thing.
Yeah, we're actually, like,
watching the walkthrough, right? But then in that case, I'm pausing it constantly as I, walk through what's happening, because I can't just, like, watch it once and then it's done. I have to, like, increment my way through it to actually be able to follow directions.
Yeah, although honestly, even there, for me, I would prefer a wiki page with a series of still shots.
Same, yeah.
And I think a big part of that for me is not that I'm inherently against, like, YouTube as a thing. It's just that it's so much slower to get what I need.
It's a grossly inefficient way of giving out information.
Because
what you really need is just bite-sized chunks of information.
If there were a YouTube channel that was like 30-second answers, and the whole way it operated was, you get 30, we'll take 30 seconds, all of our videos are 30 seconds long, and they will give you what you need, then I'd be really into it. But when it's like, oh, hey, I want to know how to find this one location for this one quest, and it's like, here's a 58-minute video that's 10 minutes of, like, setup and 48 minutes of, hey, we showed you everything in the entire game one by one. Like, I am very annoyed.
I don't remember who did this series, but I gotta give them props for doing exactly that thing you're talking about. There's, back when I was playing Destiny 1 heavily during the Taken King expansion, there were these calcified fragments that were hidden all over this stupid dreadnought, and you had to have like 40 of them to move forward in one of the quests. And I had gotten like 30 of them on my own, and I was trying to find the last 10, and someone had basically done exactly that, like 30-second long videos that were just, here's a screen, like, this is where I am on the map, now follow this guide real quick, and it's gonna like go straight to the fragment.
Yeah.
And those were super useful in knocking out those last couple, in a way that I don't think that the still screenshots maybe would have, because they were, like, a lot of the still screenshots wouldn't have made a lot of sense without understanding where they were spatially.
Yeah.
And it goes back to making me think of the same thing that Kodra was saying earlier, where the YouTube video doesn't feel like it's respecting my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't need you to tell me who I am. I know who you are. I don't need you to tell me to like and subscribe. I'll do it if you don't annoy me. But you just annoyed me, so never mind.
Man, that's a whole other level of frustrating for me, because, like, there's a lot of communities that I care about somewhat, that do not have any kind of an online guide or like blogging presence.
Mm-hmm.
I found basically all Monster Hunter advice on the internet is on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, also 90% of it is on 2 YouTube channels.
Well, and the same's true for like everything for Destiny. Like if you want to look something up for Destiny, it's going to be in the YouTube channel. And you're going to have to decipher it, which is in part why a lot of my blog posts when I was heavily into that was regurgitating things I got on YouTube so that they could, someone could have a blog post finally to read on how to do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's games, I don't know, like I would probably end up disengaging from a game like that. Like if I was super into it, and I mean, both Destiny and Monster Hunter I enjoyed but didn't stick with. But if I had started digging for information and my only recourse was a bunch of YouTube videos, it probably would have made me not only check out of the YouTube videos, but check out of the game a bit. I couldn't find useful information in a way that was easily digestible for me.
Yeah, and I get it, because like a lot of the incentive for making facts and publishing them to game facts and doing things like that has always been like showing off how much you know about the game and making a name for yourself in that. And YouTube works a lot better for that element of it, certainly. But
I mean, to some extent, like a lot of what I've noticed is the games that have the YouTube only presence are games that are far more popular on console than on PC, or are console mostly first titles.
Well, and games like Monster Hunter and Destiny are games that like a textual description in a lot of cases wouldn't be super helpful on things like stuff related to strategies and tactics and stuff like that. So
the problem with Monster Hunter though is like there's no middle ground, because there is the YouTube channel, which is the easy to digest version of the information. Then there's the Reddit post, which is pure nonsense. Like reading the Reddit post usually is like way more detail than I really care about. So like there needs to be kind of a happy medium between those two.
I mean, when you start talking numbers in Monster Hunter, it gets complicated super fast.
Right.
Yeah,
But
and it is one of those
rather...
games that doesn't really explain what all of those numbers mean. But then you go try to find the information, and oh my god.
But I'd still rather have the super complicated, Reddit post than the YouTube video, because I can skim and find the piece that I'm looking for much more easily than I can skim through a video.
And honestly, for the really complicated stuff like that, I feel like
you don't actually need to know it.
Yeah, I don't want a video about it. I do want it as text, like charts and tables of things.
Yeah.
Like, if I want the list of how all the different Pokemon types, relate to each other and which ones do double damage and half damage and stuff, I don't want a video where somebody goes down the list of them all. I want that nice chart.
Yeah, I will say, like, this is kind of a point of frustration right now with me and Elder Scrolls Online, is a lot of the quote-unquote build guides are YouTube videos.
Ugh.
Like, YouTube videos with like maybe a Google Sheet or something like that with some information associated. Well,
that's
like
terrible.
That's terrible.
And it's hard. It's hard to tell like how fresh that information is as well. But yeah, no. Yeah. So this is most of the reason why I have a complete, probably cringeworthy build, but I don't care because I don't want to dig through a YouTube video to do a build.
Yeah, like for that, I would want like a wiki page with textual information and then maybe some embedded videos showing off how that build plays. That would be fine. You can have some video elements, just don't use video for the whole damn thing.
I mean, to some extent, the Warframe community suffers from some of that same thing. Like, there are some sources, but, like, there's a lot that are YouTube videos.
I do miss, like, sort of the waning popularity of GameFAQs as a website. That's what I used growing up.
Oh, yeah. Same here. That's still where I go for a lot of older games.
Well, and I also miss, like, forums being a reasonable option. Now forums are just a lot of salt and anger and very, very, very little information, most of which is outdated.
I heard an interesting, like, take, which is Discords are going to be the new forums.
I mean, to some extent, they've become the new quote-unquote guild forum.
Okay, and I'll avoid them the way I avoided forums. That'll be fine.
I mean, so like, you know, I think I said this thing that you're quoting.
It's like, I hate them enough asynchronously. I would like just be ablaze with fury if I had to deal with them in real time. No.
Like, I understand, you know, conceptually how they could be really beneficial, and you know, I'm on a few Discords, but not very much.
I don't think it's going to happen officially because, like, I've watched a couple crash and burn already.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, like the longevity of them, and to have them as a resource where it's easy to go back and find information at a later date. Like, sure, if you have a question about a particular class in World of Warcraft, there is a Discord for that, and you can go and talk to the theory crafters, and that's kind of cool. But you run into potentially the same issue that forums always had, which is you go and ask your noob question, and people pounce on you and give you grief. But also, you know, how long is that gonna last?
Well, okay, so I do have a tale related to this. For a period of time, there was a official, unofficial Rift Discord that like was started by some friends of mine, and it was a pretty chill place. And like most of the devs were on there, and they were actively answering questions. And then I don't know if it was Tryon or some of the Rift staff decided, okay, we're going to start promoting this thing.
Bad move.
Opened the floodgates. And, like, I was gone from it for, I don't know, a couple weeks. And when I came back, that Discord just ceased to exist. And I never could really figure out the full story, but something happened, and all of the official staff folks just pulled up because they were told to. And as a result, like, it just died. Just straight up died. So I have a feeling like any quote-unquote game-sponsored one is going to suffer that fate eventually.
Like, I feel like just the moderation would be hell. It's bad enough on forums, but...
But mostly what I was talking about from a Discord standpoint is, like, I feel like Discord has replaced the guild forum. Like, the small group interaction type amongst guilds or groups of players, or in the case of, you know, me deciding to either do a forum or a Discord. For Blogist, I decided to do a Discord so that, you know, people could talk through any issues that they might have during the event.
I think it's useful for that context, but again, like, my problem with it is, you know, it's great we have a Discord for Blogist, and if you have Blogist again next year, like, useful things that people might have said this year will be impossible to dig back up again.
Oh, absolutely. So I feel like we're going to have to archive it, like either in a series of Word or like Google Docs or something like that. Like anything that comes out of there that's useful is going to have to be tracked elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's not, you know, it's not threaded, so it's hard to keep track of what is useful. You know, it's sort of like following something on Twitter. If you happen to be busy that day and you come back to it later, like, you're gonna miss half of the interesting things that happened because you just don't have time to scroll back through what everybody was talking about all day.
I mean, there are times I can't even follow our Slack. Like, a lot of the times I can't follow our Slack. So I definitely don't think Discord is the option for finding game information. Like, not on a public sense. Asking your friends for how things work, sure.
Yeah, like for games that I need help with that I know one of you guys has finished, like I can just jump on our Slack and ask Ash how to deal with those horrible spinny bugs in Hollow Knight, and he helped me out.
Them with magic.
And it was great. Also drop a chandelier on one. But yeah, for a game that none of you have played, like, yeah, some weird public Discord with people I've never met, like, I don't know.
No, that's not ever going to happen. That said, I have for some reason joined several public Discords. Just, I don't know, because I'm a glutton for punishment. Although I will say, sometimes a Discord is all it takes for me to understand that this is not a game I'm going to want to play. Like, especially for something that's in early release or has like a beta or alpha community that hangs out on a Discord. Like, the feeling of that community is enough to make me realize, no, I really am not going to like this game at all.
Right.
Ashes of Creation, for example. I mean, there are probably people that are listening that are amped for that game, but just a few minutes of watching that community told me that, no, this is probably not going to be a community that I'm interested in at all. Especially if it's a game that, like, requires any kind of heavy community interaction. So I guess to some extent, if there is a official, unofficial Discord for a thing, you can at least do a try before you buy on that community.
Oh, that's an interesting way of putting it. I feel like this isn't selling people on, Discords, though.
Discords are really cool. Like, I feel like they are a good option. I feel like they're probably a better option at this point than Slack, simply because, like, you have a decent voice option, and it's free.
Define decent. Because my computer hates Discord so very much.
Same.
See, I have no problem with Discord. Like, I think Discord sounds as good as, the TeamSpeak that we use, so...
I've never had any issues with Discord voice.
I've never had anything but issues with Discord voice.
Man, I'm honestly probably on Discord more than I am on TeamSpeak anymore, and that's not saying a lot, because I'm not on either of them, but, like, especially when doing... things like grouping with a bunch of people for Diablo 3, like, I'm absolutely going to use Discord, or hanging out in somebody's stream, I'm going to use Discord.
Yeah, it's nice, you can partition things also, so I don't feel as weird. Like, I would feel weird inviting some random people to, our TeamSpeak if I wanted to run a raid, pug a raid or something in some game, but I can absolutely, like, throw out a link to Discord, and pretty much everyone has Discord at this point too, which helps.
I mean, it seems like it's become the most ubiquitous voice option at this point. The power of free is really strong.
This is true.
I mean, and I feel like it's a better option than, like, Twitch, their voice offering, or like Blizzard's voice offering. So
I don't know Twitch. I guess the Twitch client used to be the Curse client.
Yes, and it still has that voice offering.
Right. I don't think I ever used that while it was the Curse client.
I mean, I used it. Like, I end up using everything at least once just to see what it's like. I feel like Blizzard's voice offering is one of the worst.
I mean, I've not actually tried it recently because I don't play things like Overwatch, but the last time I've tried it, it was incredibly bad.
So the funny thing is the Overwatch option is not bad at all, but their communities thing seems significantly worse than the Overwatch voice. And I don't understand why those are two different product offerings. But anyway, we are so far off track at this point.
But I think
isn't that the point?
It's, that's our normal MO. But, it all ties together, I think, in terms of where you go to get information about what the heck you're supposed to be doing in a game.
I had a sort of random thought. For me, there are some games that I will not look up a guide for basically ever for any reason. And they're stealth games. Like, I want to find everything. It's the only game type that I can think of that I do this for. But
that makes sense to me, like, because for you, a stealth game, the enjoyable loop is you trying to figure out paths around that you won't be seen. Like, so the actual finding of those paths and how to get your clean hands is like the enjoyment loop for you.
Yeah, stealth games are puzzle games.
Right,
ultimately.
yeah, it's the same, application that I have for puzzle game. Like, I don't look up the answers to puzzles unless I think I'm going to walk away from the game if I can't figure it out.
Okay, so I think we've probably rung that topic for as much as we're going to get right now. Before we move on to another topic that may take a little bit, I do have a couple things to talk about Elder Scrolls Online real quick. So I've talked about this in the past, that I had this weird, I don't know, it was one of my conditions for playing the game, is that I wanted to beat all 3 factions worth of content, which is effectively 150 levels worth of content. And I did that, and I've moved on to the DLC content. And first of all, I am super impressed with the DLC. I am playing those in the order that they came out, so I'm also being weird about that too. Even though right now with Tamriel Unlimited, you can play anything in any order you choose, because everything scales.
I will also point out that the DLC always scaled.
But I want to do them in the order in which they came out. So I have now beaten the story content for Orsinium, and man, that is a good DLC. And if that is evidence of what I can expect from a quote-unquote DLC for Elder Scrolls Online, I am going to be super happy, because it was really good. And it was bigger than I guess I expected it to be. It was basically a supersized normal zone that was added into the game. So it was kind of like a Glenumbra or something like that, like a big zone, just chock full of random stuff. And I'm still working my way around and doing the few objectives that I didn't get to before I finished up the story. And normally, when I do an Elder Scrolls zone, I will purposefully delay doing the final content before I've already knocked off all of the things that I knew about. But this was good enough that it was kind of wanting to turn the pages of a good book. I kept focus firing the main story because it was good.
What?
Yeah. I know. I couldn't stop myself from doing that. So yeah, I kind of, I was far from Crit Path. I did a lot of piddling in the process, but I still have a significant amount of zone to finish up before I feel good moving to the next expansion content. But mostly the thing that I wanted to talk about, and I've talked about this a little bit on my blog and on Slack, but my God, does doing all 150 levels worth of content really pay off? In a way that, starting back at Mass Effect 1 and carrying your save game to Mass Effect 2 and carrying your save game to Mass Effect 3 pays off. So I did not know how smart the quest content was going to be about that sort of thing. Namely, I was originally a Daggerfall character, so I didn't know if it would just always treat me like a Daggerfall character. And it absolutely does not. All of the stuff that I did in Daggerfall, and all of the stuff that I did in Aldmeri, and all of the stuff that I did in Ebonheart has moved forward with me. And I am constantly meeting characters that I had interactions with in those 3 factions worth of content, and they remember me and talk to me as though we've done stuff in the past. And sometimes it's very friendly, and sometimes it's less friendly because we last parted on chill terms. So I am super pumped at the level of detail that they've carried forward into this first DLC, and I am hoping that integrity continues on all of the other ones, because wow, it is a really cool experience.
I had a really fun time popping into what was the word I'm looking for? Popping into Morrowind, the Morrowind expansion, and being like, oh hey, this is Seyda-Neen. I know this town, and it's how I remember it.
Yeah. I had a lot of that going through the tail end of the Ebonheart Pact, because Windhelm and Riften, they were close enough to what I remembered that they were recognizable, but there was enough difference there to account for the huge gap in time between Skyrim and the earlier time that ESO represents. So I absolutely enjoyed running around Waterdeep and by Waterdeep, I mean Riften. But to some extent, like, you know, like all of this content has felt that way. Like, it is recognizable, and wow, is Rothgar a really cool area. And I love the zones that do deep dives into a specific racial group. And Rothgar absolutely is all about orcs. And if you don't like orcs, you're not going to like Orsinium, but I happen to like orcs. I like orcs a lot. I like Elder Scrolls orcs better than any other orcs. But, I mean, I greatly enjoyed, I can't remember if it was Grotwood or Green Shade, but the one where you're deep diving into the Bosmer. Like, I thought that was great. That was, like, some of the coolest content. But anyway, mostly all I wanted to really cover was that, wow, there's significant payoff for doing the new game and New Game Plus Plus. And I think it's mostly that when they did Orsinium, they wanted to sprinkle enough characters that people would remember, regardless of what faction they chose. And if you did all three factions, then you're just constantly running into somebody from your past. Okay, Kodra, this is one of your topics. Long games with failure states.
So, I've been playing a lot of Civilization 6 recently, and I've also been playing in our board game group a lot of Kingdom Death. Kingdom Death is probably the more egregious form of this, but if I am investing a large amount of time in something, I really get frustrated when it's like, oh, well, I've spent, 6 hours getting myself set up in this Civ game, or probably it's more like 2 hours getting set up in this Civ game, only to, like, discover that I'm super far behind and I'm not going to win. This one's not going to be fun for me to play. And the other game that I haven't played, but I know Tam has talked about that made me think of this was Mech Warrior.
Oh, the new Battletech.
Battletech.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Where you, like, probably invested, 4 to 6 hours and then just had to completely start over again?
More or less.
Yeah, that's a really, really scummy, like, not great feeling from a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a game would have to be incredibly fun otherwise for me not to just walk away from something like that.
I feel like this links back to our talk about packs a little bit, because like I said back then, there used to be a time that I was willing to sink hours into a game and then realize that I'd done it all wrong and start over. But I can't do that.
That was one of the things I was going to say, is like, it used to be that I approached games as, oh, my first playthrough, I'm going to abandon it because this is my learning the system playthrough.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to stop at some point once I feel like I've reached enough technical mastery and re-roll. And I don't feel like I do that often, or at least I don't happily do that.
I think Civilization games could definitely stand some sort of, even some basic messaging changes. Because one of the things is, like, the basic difficulty of a Civilization game, every single Civilization game going all the way back, is always Prince.
That's not actually the lowest difficulty.
No, it's not the lowest difficulty by a lot, actually. Like,
It's probably not a good difficulty to start at.
Yeah, especially with a new game where you're learning a whole bunch of new systems. If you just dive in, it's overwhelming, and you get, like, you feel a lot of pain and punishment while also not necessarily learning how systems work very well. So I did a whole bunch of, like, half attempted starts at Civ 6, and then, like, I dropped it down to Warlord, and I actually played through a game, and I definitely steamrolled, and Warlord was definitely not, like, the right difficulty for me, but it allowed me to actually see what all of the systems were doing. It let me get out of the early game without feeling horrendously outgunned.
Well, I feel like it's particularly bad in games like Civ because there's just so much setup that's usually pretty much the same thing every time you play. Like, I'm trying to think of other games that have that too, where basically that first, couple of hours of the game, you're doing the Stellaris, has a lot of that. Like, up until the point that you actually run into another empire and
you have no idea how well you're doing.
You don't have any idea how well you're doing, and you're doing the same stuff that you do. Like, if you have played multiple times before, you're doing just that same stuff again. Like, there's no real difference to the last time you played, or the time before that, or the time before that. Like, it's not until you meet and begin to interact with your opponents that, like, you actually have to change your strategies.
I feel like the sim games were really in this category too, where any of the Sim City, Sim Tower, I didn't play a lot of the Sims, but that may also be the case where, like, your first time playing, you were just going to be a complete failure as a city manager or a tower manager or a whatever manager. And at some point, it just benefited you to completely restart and take what you learned from the previous play and do a decent job of getting past that early game.
Yeah, I definitely have the same. If a game wants a lot of my time, it needs to not waste it. Because I definitely feel like with some of those, I got started and whoops, I failed once, or like I failed a little bit enough times that this is just not tenable. And like, that doesn't make me want to play the game. Like, I'm not inspired to start over and try to do better this time. I'm inspired to do something else with my time.
I feel like City Skylines had a lot of that for me. Anno whatever, I forget the number.
Anno 2070 or whatever.
Yeah. I had a lot of that with that one too.
Yeah. And I think that was... we sort of had the conversation with Kodra and Ash, but I think that was one of the reasons why Gloomhaven feels so good.
Yeah.
Because if you fail in Gloomhaven, you're still making progress.
Yeah, even though I kind of hate the term, being able to fail forward is usually an enjoyable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I really like about roguelites, is that there's typically, when you eventually die, because you will, you made some overall progress.
Yeah, you got
that makes your next chance easier.
Yeah, something tangible out of it that applies the next time around. Wasn't just a fail state that maybe you learned something from, but you don't actually get anything tangible to help you next time.
Yeah, it's not that it's any easier.
As we discussed a little bit with Heroes of Hammerwatch, mostly I'm just okay with that. I'm okay if just the part that gets easier is I'm used to this game a little bit more.
I guess for me, that really depends on how much of my time it has eaten before I failed. Because
that's fair.
If I spend a little bit of time and fail and I learn something, that's fine. But if I'm spending hours doing something and fail and don't get anything else out of it except, I learned something, I'm probably not going to be super happy.
Yeah, I guess that's important. With, again, Risk of Rain, it's max of 15-20 minutes.
Yeah, and if it's a quick iteration, and Heroes of Hammerwatch is one of those where it does annoy me when it's in aggregate. One run where I just bomb and get nothing doesn't bother me a ton, but when it's 3 or 4 in a row, then I get really annoyed. And if it's really quick, then yeah, sure, we iterate and go. But if it's
on the other side, we have Tales of Majale, where that might be you might run out of lives hour and a half in.
Yeah.
Or more.
I remember having a hard time getting actually started in Darkest Dungeon. That it felt like it took me a while to get traction. And were I not super into the artwork and the feel of that game, I would have maybe had more trouble with it. Because it felt like at times that game could be very soul-crushing. So we have one more topic on the docket as it stands, and Kodra, this one is you as well. Do you want to give some form of a lead-in?
I guess so. Recently, there's been another thing on the internet where a harassment squad of gamers, quote unquote, have led to the firings of a pair of people from ArenaNet. And this has sparked a huge revitalization of the people who were heavily involved in the Gamergate mob back in 2014, and it's incredibly frustrating to like deal with this never ends, and seems like this is never gonna end.
Yeah, because now they've decided that they can actually get people fired by raising a fuss and all of this. So of course they are doing everything they can to get seemingly every woman developer that they can think of fired, because of course they are.
I mean, I just don't have the words to describe how exhausting this is. I mean, the Gamergate was a giant flaming pile of garbage, but the reality is it never really ended, and now we have a pretty horrible flare-up.
Yeah.
Well, and it's especially noticeable right now because as we've talked a little bit about, I'm in the process of trying to revitalize Blogist, and instead of just doing Blogist, also doing a little bit of Newbie Blogger Initiative and a little bit of Developer Appreciation Week, all kind of rolled into one event since none of those were really active. And in going through my blog roll, I have been painfully aware of the number of female voices that just quietly stopped blogging along the way and haven't updated their blogs since, 2015 when Gamergate started, I mean, really picking up steam. And I feel horribly guilty for not doing more than I did. And even the little bit that I did got me DDoS'd and partially doxed and added to a bunch of lists. And quite frankly, it terrified the shit out of me. So I got quiet. And I think that's the problem, is like it terrified a lot of us and we got quiet.
I mean, I'll be honest, if I was added to some lists, I had a small amount of harassment during that time, but I wasn't super active, never had a super popular blog, and so I mostly escaped the worst of it. If it had been much worse than that, I probably wouldn't be active now. I have other normal life things to deal with. I really don't need to be harassed perpetually by strangers on the internet. And I know a lot of, women, especially at the time, just checked out and either had more targeted harassment than I did, or just looked at the possibility of that and said, nope. And so that's why this frustrates me. Like, I don't even care about the circumstances that instigated this. The fact that it has now fueled this garbage fire is the really troubling part for me.
Well, and like my core problem with the sequence of events that's happened is, like, I have fairly nuanced feelings about the back and forth that sparked all of this, but I feel like ArenaNet did the wrong thing. Just straight up did the wrong thing, because they've now emboldened a group of people to do horrible things because they got a win. And like, it doesn't matter that they came out a day later and said, oh no, they were going to do this anyway. That's not how this is playing. That's not how this is playing. Like, this is playing that we got someone fired on Reddit. Like, our actions got them fired.
And honestly,
it is already starting a chilling effect.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I also, I mean, I do have opinions about sort of what started this, but I don't know. Whether people lobbied for it or not, like, I just think that firing those two people was a very poor decision.
Yes.
And also, I mean, whether or not the initial behavior that instigated this was good or bad, like, I so understand it, and I bet you guys understand, folks listening, understand. I mean, maybe some of you won't, but if you are a woman, if you are any kind of minority, like, how often you have to explain yourself and prove yourself and deal with people who are condescending, that you're exhausted and defensive. And it doesn't necessarily always excuse bad behavior, but boy, am I sympathetic to it.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Like I know what it's like to have someone like tell you how to do your job, and I'm not having to deal with that all of the damn time.
And the thing is, like, this could have been like the most benign interaction ever, but just the fact that this was the 300th version of this interaction in a row that this person had to deal with, like, I've got to give them a lot of slack. Also, I've got to give them a lot of slack because they weren't community staff. Like, were this a CM, I feel like the situation would feel a lot different. Like, were their job interacting with the community? This is a writer.
And if they were on, an ArenaNet official account, not a private account, I think that makes a difference too.
Yes.
I mean,
at this point, I can't, in good conscience, like, play anything from ArenaNet as long as the CEO remains in place.
Yeah,
his statement afterwards was awful. It was completely awful and emboldened all the people who supported this kind of.
Yeah, he is very clearly the problem, like
he is
the core of this particular problem.
And he can't have been the only problem.
No.
But he is definitely a problem.
I mean, the positive is I got a bunch of disk space back.
Yeah. Like, I have things that I can do with that 20 gig. Like, my hard drive had the red bar for disk space, and now it's back to green again. So.
And I guess we talked about this in Slack a bit before too, but it's sad because there are good people who work there who are getting screwed over by this.
Yep.
I'm twitchy about saying anything. So the last time I spoke up on this was when I got racist death threats mailed to me.
Ugh.
But demanding perfection of anybody under any circumstances is horseshit.
Yeah.
And in an industry, especially one where the average tenure of your talent has dropped by 70% in the last 15 years, as a company, you cannot sustainably throw your employees under the bus. And you certainly can't contribute to making the industry as a whole worse for everyone in it, because that's how an industry dies.
Yes.
And expertise matters. It's not sufficient to have, like, expertise matters. Skills matter. Game design is a skill. It's a hard skill. There are a lot of things that go into game design, and you could have 5 or 6 different degrees and still not cover the breadth of what game design is. Most game designers I worked with, some of which had been doing it for 20 years, were still specialized and still had entire swaths of the discipline of game design that they just didn't do because they weren't qualified for it. And they knew that. And they would, in some cases, try to branch out, and a lot of times have a lot of trouble with it because it's complicated. And these aren't people who, like, don't know anything about games or don't play very many games. These are people who you don't stay in the games industry unless your life revolves around video games in some respect. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many games you've played. It doesn't matter how much you know, because quite frankly, unless you've built them, and unless, honestly, I don't even presume to talk about the details of making MMOs to other people who make MMOs, even though I spent nearly a decade making MMOs, because I don't know the circumstances. Maybe their tools don't do that. Maybe their tools are really good at some other thing. There's so much history and there's so much baggage, especially for any game that lasts for any period of time, that the level of complexity is insane. And to pair that, and the level of expertise that's necessary to be good at it is also higher than it seems, because unlike almost every other industry, there's no training in video games. You don't sign on to a new position and have a week-long or 2-week-long or whatever training course where you learn how to use everything. You get a desk with a computer and maybe some design docs, if somebody still has them and they're still up to date. They probably aren't. And they say, hey, mess around with the tool set and see what you can figure out. We'll come back in a few days with some tasks for you, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, that's day one, is, hey, figure these tools out as fast as you possibly can because we need this by Friday. Go for it. And so on top of just knowing things about what it takes to make video games, you also have to have the expertise to pick up on new things at blinding speed. It's just a part of, and it's not a good part, but it's just a part of the system. So the expectation that, and it's one that I've seen, like, oh, you should know better than to talk on social media. Who's going to train you? Who's done social media training? Has your company done social media training? If no, your company doesn't get to demand anything of you on a social media. They can ask that you don't affiliate yourself with your company, and should. And notably, nobody asked Price not to associate with ArenaNet.
In fact,
quite the opposite.
Yeah,
they knew who they were hiring when they hired her.
Yeah, and the other thought before I get off my soapbox, and I'm sorry, this one's hard for me, just generally, but I think I lost it.
I think we just generally we need to understand how to consume products in this world where everyone is connected in a healthier fashion. And that largely means, hey, maybe just if you think something is bad, definitely your feedback is probably not valuable enough to ruin somebody's day over.
Well,
and I feel like the customer is always right mentality was always toxic.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's only gotten more and more toxic as the years have gone by, and the ease of making somebody's life hell for not being sufficiently subservient to you has increased.
And that's, it's one thing to say, hey, we have to be better as customers, not expecting these things, but also you know that there are always going to be some people who are entitled, demanding assholes. Yep. And companies need to do better by their employees.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's who really needs to change, is the companies need to stop with the customer is always right thing, because the customer is not always right. And the sort of customer who says the customer is always right is always an asshole.
The thing that I've never understood, and this is even okay, so I'm in a weird position because I know a lot of people in the games industry. That's just a thing that's always been a point of reality for me. So when I talk about games, I don't personalize them. I talk about mostly my feelings about a thing. Because it always annoys me when people try and present a point as though it's gospel, that this is the truth of the thing, and this is the only way to take this viewpoint. So I always present my things as I feel this way or I think this way. But besides that, even taking out of the equation that I know people and these are human beings to me, it's these people I don't even need that point of view to come to that conclusion. I don't understand attacking people specifically for the actions of many or for the products that they create. And it's more than just games. The number of times I have been in a restaurant and I have seen someone tear apart the wait staff over something that probably the wait staff had no control over, and doing it because they felt entitled to, because it wasn't someone that being nice to them was going to benefit them. So
because they could get away with it.
they can get away with it. So there's this culture of disposable people and being able to take your fury out on people that don't really matter. And that has kind of translated into games. So like we scapegoat these people as being the source of all the things that frustrate us in games, and I don't understand when or what leads someone to personalizing something to where they blame this one person for all of their failing.
I don't know, it's just suspiciously a lot easier for people to do that when the person in question is some type of minority.
Yeah.
I'll just never get that mindset. Like,
that's because you have empathy, Belle. You're not a sociopath.
There's this constant hungry demand from players of basically everything to have these dialogues with developers and then feel slighted if developers don't want to engage. But this is the cost of engaging. So why would you bother? And the answer is because you don't have a choice. Because the video games industry is hugely networking driven. And unless you have, I don't know, $3,000 a year at least, no, it's significantly more than that, more like $8,000 a year at least, to trek out to California for GDC, you don't have networking opportunities unless you happen to live in a city that's lucky enough to have a regularly occurring game dev meetup that happens to have the right people there. So you've got to go on Twitter. That's awful, but you've got to go on Twitter and you've got to engage because you need the other devs who might hire you in the future to go find you. And I mean, hell, a huge part of the reason I never found a job afterward is because people would be like, well, what's your social media presence outside of like the one big game you launched? Like, we don't have anything to show how you think or what you do, because I don't participate on Twitter. I don't post my stuff anywhere. I posted blog stuff, and there was a whole bunch of design related stuff that I put on my blog because that was my way of communicating my experience. It's what I had to do. It's a lot of work to do it.
I do more in the days when there was a healthy back and forth between gamers and the folks that built the games.
I think
that used to exist.
I feel like that always was masking the harassment, though.
Yeah. I don't actually think that's ever been a thing.
Well, so to have some sort of relationship, there has to be full free consent given. And if devs always feel like they're in a position where they have to be on social media and they have to engage because their career is going to depend on it, then no matter how pleasant the interaction might be, if the fans are reasonable human beings, devs are still there because they have to be and not necessarily because they want to be.
Yeah.
I will also point out that To the Ground was 10 years ago.
Oh, wow, it was. Yeah.
It's been a long time since there has even been a pretense of healthy communication between devs and players.
I don't think there's ever been. I think that when it became possible to engage with, to connect, it immediately painted a bunch of targets on people. Because now there's somebody to blame for whatever you don't like.
And maybe I'm coloring my feelings based on my own personal experience of knowing people and having a slightly different relationship with folks other than the traditional talking at a person on Twitter.
I mean, I've certainly had very positive interactions with devs on Twitter, but I don't know, at what personal cost does that come for them? Because for every one positive interaction like mine, how many crappy, harassing, miserable, or just not even harassing, but just like, I think you did this wrong, I don't like the way you did this, like that they have to read through and put up with, if not engage with. I mean, that's incredibly painful.
I mean, I know I can be fairly critical on my blog.
It's not. I mean, it's not about being critical because game devs. I mean, I realize I'm putting words in a bunch of other people's mouths and I shouldn't. But by and large, like, feedback is valuable. Feedback is a gift. But feedback is a gift. Hey, I didn't like this thing, or I really did like this thing. We never hear enough. We liked this thing, but we didn't like this thing gives us information, and it's possible to have productive things. It's like, oh, hey, this is why we did it this way. This is why, oh, this thing that people didn't like was the result of these decisions. We should make different decisions because these were the wrong decisions.
And I guess to some extent, it's different than, like, so if I put something on my blog and someone reads it, and then they reach out to me later because of the thing that I put on my blog, it's a different dynamic because it's not me forcing myself into their space.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's I think really big.
Yeah, it's the difference between someone writing a critical movie review and someone calling up the director and saying, hey, I think you made the wrong choices here, it sucked.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the interactions that I have started off as I wrote something on my blog, and then someone reached out to me to ask me about that specific thing that I wrote on my blog, and then over time that turned into an actual real relationship.
Yeah. Versus, I mean, I get, and I mean, I realize the incredible hypocrisy with which I say we when I refer to game devs, because I haven't been one for years now, but I still get LinkedIn messages weekly from people who want to get into the games industry, and probably one out of every 5, 1 out of every 10 is somebody telling me about how they didn't like something I made and then asking me to help them get into the games industry. Like, and that's, and the response is, and the well-intentioned-ish belief is, I thought I could prove your credentials by proving you wrong, basically. If I can prove you wrong, I can Highlander my way up.
But that's never a good means of interacting.
But it's
that's the most
common.
asshole-ish way of trying to interact with someone.
Super common.
And, yeah, I mean, I also feel that way about, the pedantry of people who will, send me a comment on my blog just because I use the wrong word in a specific place. But, did you understand what I meant? No, seriously, those happen. I usually don't let them through just because they're not worth reading. But no, they happen. Like I think you meant to use this word in paragraph 5.
In the
I wrote this at 6 a.m. Give me room.
You're right. I did. Very good. You're very intelligent.
In the spirit of apropos timing, because I'd opened up my LinkedIn messages just to check. I got one in the last 10 minutes telling me about how I could have written 2 of the ESO characters better. That's what I got.
Wow.
So basically, people are just horrible. I
don't mind if people are horrible if they get better. Like, I've said horrible things in ignorance, but then I find out and get better.
And I guess that's part of the thing that I don't understand is, like, there should be a natural desire to improve yourself, and like, I guess, okay, so this is me being weird here, but, like, when I get blocked, most of the time it doesn't really bother me, but there are times it does bother me because I know I probably did something that someone found offensive, and I would have liked to have known what the thing was that somebody found offensive so that I can make a decision. Like, basically, when I encounter information like that, one of 2 things happens. Either I take that to heart and I try my damnedest to change, or two, I decide that the risk is not great enough that I'm going to continue on as is. But most of the time, it's I want to examine my own actions and figure out how I can tweak those. And like most of the time, it involves me willfully trying to erase something from like my daily interaction, because now I have a bit of information that changes the way that I view a thing, and I update my BIOS, for lack of a better term, to no longer do that thing. And sure, it's hard for a little bit because behavior becomes instinctual. But over a while, it stops being a habit, and you move on, and you're a better person for that. Like, and I don't understand. I don't know. I mean,
so I can give you the other side of this equation, because I understand that desire, and the thing here, which we've said before, is the problem, Belle, is that you're a decent human being and have empathy, and most people, when they're blocking someone on Twitter, they're exhausted. I mean, I've said this a couple of times tonight, but it's exhausting to have to correct people about something all the time. I can't even imagine what like my trans friends go through correcting people about pronouns or correcting people's stupid misconceptions constantly. It's just exhausting. And so sometimes you just look at your Twitter feed and say, this is a small space in the world that I can control. And when something sets me off, I'm just going to carve it right out. And I don't owe that person anything. I am tired and I need to protect myself. And so, it's different perhaps if it was someone that you were interacting with frequently and they blocked you. But if there was a sort of general passive relationship there, I totally, like, I understand and sympathize with you wanting to learn and grow, but the general experience on social media is that you don't run into people like that. You run into people who want to debate you or question you or just ask a lot of questions that you've answered a lot, or that there are resources out there that would explain things and they won't go Google effing search it. And so it becomes this giant black hole of your time.
Especially now that the current thing for trolls to do appears to be to politely make a polite question, just for informational reasons, meaning nothing other than just wanting to be informed. And then if you actually take the bait, then dragging you down into a dark hole of despair.
I mean, there's a word for that. It's called sea lioning.
Yep.
And it's definitely a thing. So, I totally sympathize with wishing that people would just give you a brief word to say, hey, you did this, and that's why I'm blocking you. But realistically, if most of the time, if people did that, it would just invite harassment. And so it is not worth it.
I mean, I get that. Like, and like I said, I mean, I am always wondering, but it's not like I'm actively taking steps trying to figure out why, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, if somebody wants to block me, they can block me, then it's fine. I will move on with my life, but it'll always kind of make me wonder.
You want to know why so that you can be a better person. Most people aren't interested in the trying to be a better person part of that.
No, most people want to know why so that they can explain in great detail why you were wrong to say that was why you should block them.
Yeah.
And I guess part of it too is like, I have very few beliefs that are so deeply rooted that you can't change them in a conversation. And maybe that sounds weird, but I feel like my entire life is taking in data, making decisions about it, and then changing my viewpoint about a thing based on the data I just took in. So like, I don't have a lot of deep-seated beliefs that are not that are very painful for me to change. I have things I think and things I even get passionate about, but like if you were able to present, like, or even a Google search was able to present, a different side of that point, then taken along with the rest of the information I know, that would probably cause me to update my programming, for lack of a better term. And maybe I'm using very sterile and clinical terms by relating it to programming, but like, to me, it's, I mean, I'm kind of just an AI program operating on information that I have. Anyway, that was a tangent that doesn't relate to anything.
But I do think, it's important to kind of get that across. But, I don't know. I'll be honest, sometimes if I have a problem with a person or concerned about a person's behavior on social media, I don't know. Like, I'll mute people instead of unfollow them. I'll do the most passive thing I can sometimes, because, occasionally you block someone and they'll just make a bunch of sock puppet accounts to continue harassing you about it.
Yeah.
The internet is a kind of a mostly shitty place where sometimes decent people carve out little spaces for themselves.
And okay, so here's a question. Like, do you feel like some of this is due to the fact that, like, these people don't feel the people that they're harassing are real to some extent?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That they're just pixels?
Either not real or not as
well,
not as human as they are. I don't know.
Yeah,
yes,
that's the thing.
asterisk.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it is the sort of dissociation you get of these are pixels, and it's not always easy to envision them as whole human beings on the other side, of a keyboard somewhere else in the world. But some of it is that, they don't necessarily think they're real people for
They're not
other reasons.
the right sort of people.
Or just, doesn't bother me, shouldn't bother them.
Yeah.
I can take it when somebody tells me I'm wrong. Why can't they? Try having people tell you you're wrong 1,000 times a day.
Well, I think that's the big thing about social media is there's an economy of scale that you just can't really understand unless you're in that person's shoes and seeing that much fire in their direction.
Yeah. Some of it I feel like is kind of like how otherwise seemingly nice, reasonable people will turn into complete and utter assholes when they get into a car. Like, there's that element of it, but much more.
Well, at this point, we have gone over our normal stopping time. Do we have any kind of parting thoughts about this to wrap it up? Like, I feel like it's too big of a thing to really actually wrap up.
Everyone should be more like Belle and be decent human beings who actually have empathy. That would be a good start.
Be excellent to one another.
I'm not saying anyone should pattern themselves after me. Like, please, God, that's probably a bad idea. I certainly don't have things figured out.
Does anybody?
But like, maybe think about everybody you interact with as that they're probably as insecure or as concerned or as worried or as, I don't know, troubled by things as you might be. So maybe think of them as a person worthy of respect.
Don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated. And if you don't know, ask.
Yes. So much yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show. And if you were at all curious about Bloggist, that will be starting on July 25th. You can check out AggroNet.com. In the sidebar, there's a Bloggist link if you're curious. I am trying desperately to rekindle the blogging community. And so far, we have like 41 or so blogs signed up. And it's still a ways out. So hopefully it'll be awesome. Anyway, we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.